There's a group of players that wear the famed red and white that would like to see some footballs in the air a little bit more often here in 2024 headed their way. We will run down the wide receiver core here at the Voice of College Football. Welcome in, everyone. Huskers live for the next hour. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. It's Mark and it's Justin. Of course, catch Justin on Cheesy Corn Sports and also on the Big Ten Show.
Let's go. You got it.
More details going forward. What's that?
I said you got it that time.
Yes,
I
thought I did. Thought I nailed it.
Yep. Not the Big Ten Network. Full disclosure.
The Big Ten Show.
We're trying.
It's a great watch, a great listen. And also, again, Cheesy Corn Sports and Justin producing great content here at the Voice of College Football. GBR. How you doing tonight, Justin?
Big Red. I'm doing well. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm good. I've got a triple header of sorts. Just came off the Iowa show right into Nebraska. And I am hosting for John D'Adamo tonight over in the Michigan show at 8 o'clock Eastern time. So may want to check out here a minute or two early.
Yep. Let's do it. And yeah, you can get some intel on Michigan over there. You won't be able to roast as much as we do with John because Mark will get you. He'll tell you to call in. So you don't want those problems.
Yeah, I am big stickler on facts and information and accuracy. So if you post anything that doesn't quite add up, I'm going to come after you.
If you want to see it
accountable.
If you want to see it, follow Mark on Twitter. He'll post the little screenshots of when people act up in the comments.
I rarely do that. But I was a bit annoyed by somebody in particular the other day.
They have it coming when you do it.
I was. Before we get to some of our other topics here, speaking of which, I posted a video and did a series on TV ratings, and this was about a month ago. And my objective was to make conference comparisons. Mm-hmm. So I added up the numbers in different ways to compare the conferences and give it context, because again, it's not just about the numbers, because a lot of that has to do with what network was the game on at what time and how big was the game. Was that particular program down? Do they usually get better numbers? All those things, but the numbers typically don't lie. So that series was about matching up the conferences. To no big surprise, the SEC and the Big Ten are hauling in much better numbers than anybody else. And it's only going to skyrocket even more with the additions coming in from the two conferences, and especially with Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12. They are taking with them, Justin, 14 of the top 17 TV ratings from last season in the Big 12.
That's crazy. That's absurd.
So the point I wanted to make here is we're doing a different series that we just released all the videos this week over on the national channel, and we're comparing the teams within the same conference. So it's like a Big Ten video looking at all the games. And I thought the fairest way to do it was, even though we looked at the non-conference games, I didn't add those up because Ohio State's off playing Notre Dame in front of 10 million people. Nebraska had the big outing against Colorado, which was a bit of an aberration. I don't know if Colorado is going to draw those kind of numbers going forward. We'll see. But if you look at just the in-conference games, and then again, you got to put it into context, you draw a lot from that. And Nebraska had the fourth highest TV viewership behind, take a guess, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. There you go.
Okay.
And so for a 5-7 football team, just underlines again the popularity, the fan base, the loyalty, and all of that.
Correct.
For this football team.
Yeah, and it's one of, I mean, surprisingly, it's well, not surprisingly, I guess, but it's one of the main things that, a lot of the players, point to when they commit, when they're talking about Nebraska. It's like the fan loyalty, the atmosphere. People want to go play it, and I think it matters even more so in the NIL. And I might be overthinking this, but this is kind of just my theory on it, because I'm always thinking about these things. Is like, especially in the age of like social media, you want a fan base and a team that rocks heavy with you because they impact your brand. And so like those things aren't minuscule anymore with this stuff, because the amount of following you have and the amount of, all of that plays into it, it matters, and it builds your brand in like I said, that's why a lot of, you have a lot of Nebraska players that, go on to do stuff like this. And they got, 15, 16, the big schools, they got these crazy followings. These small schools, they really don't. So that I think that even more so is going to help teams out going forward. Just the overall identity and how well the fan base is and how passionate they are and active they are.
For sure. And those numbers are just going to explode when Nebraska gets better. That's
Yes.
point number one. But as they get better, they're going to get better TV slots on better networks.
Yeah.
They already get those, of course, but they've got to be playing the right team. It's got to be the Wisconsin matchup on NBC,
not the Ohio State game day.
Those kind of games. Yeah, if they're playing Ohio State, regardless of how bad they are, they're going to be the Fox noon game. But it's going to move the Michigan State games of the world into those kind of, because when Ohio State and Michigan play those games, they're still Fox noon games and they're still CBS. And it's going to be less. The Big Ten Network requires everybody plays one game on those networks. But if you notice, Ohio State and Michigan only play one game on the Big Ten Network because the networks scarf up all the rest of them. So the numbers are going to go up because they're better, but they're going to have better TV slots on better locations because of that. And that's going to drive up the TV ratings.
Yeah. And to your point, like about the matchups being close. Yeah, that's another thing that's been the issue. Cause like I bring up that game day game against Ohio State, I flew out there for that game. And I kind of already knew how it was going to go, let's be honest. But, I flew out there for that game and, it seems like every time we do have a game like that, it's just set up for us to like, I don't know, fall flat on our face. We're there because like we're hyped up and this other team that's going to blow us out is 3 touchdown. It seems like we're always 2-3 touchdown underdogs when we finally make it to prime time. We get destroyed and then we never see prime time again. So to your point, yeah, it'd be nicer to be able to showcase some of the stuff, some of the good stuff that we saw this year. Nobody saw it because it did happen against some of the lesser teams, and it would be nice to be able to spotlight a lot of, what this team is doing and the progress that we're making. Cause I think to my point last week where I'm talking about just people don't understand, I think any of what's going on behind the scenes or with this team, I think part of that has to do with the visibility too of those games like you're talking about, where they're just kind of, backed behind something else, or, they're not the big game of the day. So, Nebraska fans are watching it, but not a lot of other people are watching. So
what you are setting up there, you know what it reminds me of?
What's that?
It reminds me of 2016 and Nebraska. And I'm going to liken it to this season schedule. And I'm not going to say that this is going to happen.
Oregon?
I'm just saying it looks similar.
Oregon?
So no, hang on just a second. Okay. So we've looked at the schedule, obviously, multiple times, and we'll continue to look at the schedule because it's fun. And there's an opportunity here for Nebraska to get off to a 7-0 start and then go to Columbus, Ohio. I am almost positive in 2016, they were 7-0. They went to Columbus. They were a top 10 team in the country, and it was 62-3.
There's a pick six like the first throw of the game.
I don't expect them to go to Columbus and lose 62-3, but
possible.
That just came to mind.
Yeah, and that's kind of what. That feels like just what it's happened every time. It's like we finally get a primetime game, because then, like the week before that, we were in a primetime game against Wisconsin, and I think that was the Wisconsin game that went to overtime. And then when we played Ohio State, I can't remember if that was a season. No, this was a couple seasons ago. Never mind, it's a different one. But what you're talking about there is the same exact thing that happened when game day came out in 2021. Nebraska was, it was a lot of flair for Scott Frost and stuff like that. But Justin Fields, yeah, he made us look like he just put his foot on us and stomped us. But I remember being so hyped for that Ohio State game. The second one that I'm talking about that I went to, I was a little bit more certain that we were going to lose that game. I was really hyped for that game. And I think it was like the first pass was like tipped pick six. Like it was like the very first drive, second pass was tipped pick six, and it was all over from there. It was just, yeah, it was bad. And so it's been like that for us against the teams at the top like that. Michigan this year, it's like we can't, outside of the 1 year where we had like, every game was a 1-score loss. But really outside of that season, we really haven't been competitive with these teams at the top. And it would just be nice to have a season where we're competitive with them. And by competitive, I mean, even if we keep it within 10 points, not lose by 3-4 touchdowns or 52-7, where the game's over by halftime, essentially. Hopefully we'll get to see a lot more of people, or the casual fans will get to see a lot more of Nebraska next year. And I think the impact of Raiola, I think that's going to want them to spotlight him too. So it's going to help for sure.
And Justin, it's a great point, because if I'm hearing this correctly, you're gunning for 8-4. 8-4 is going to make you happy. 8-4 is what you think this team is realistically capable of doing.
Correct.
Okay. Mm-hmm. But you're going to feel different. I think, I know I am, in just evaluating this team and every team from a non-biased standpoint. I'm going to feel different and evaluate this team differently. 8-4 played Ohio State within a score, played, all the top teams, USC within a score, just were really competitive, maybe get blown out once. That's going to happen, but generally competitive against the best teams on the schedule, versus 8-4, beat who you were supposed to beat them by one score, beat them by 10 points, and then got drubbed by everybody good. That's a whole different, and I don't know a lot of people subscribe to the theory that you are what your record says you are, and I totally get that. That's all that matters. Those are the results, but there is a different evaluation between those two scenarios.
Yeah, what you just described there is a Bo Pelini season. Bo Pelini was the captain of winning every game we should have and losing to every team that we should have.
That's true.
But it is very, in college football, I think even more so, because like in the NFL, I think it's more your record, kind of dictates who you are. I think generally that's the case. But I think college football has been such a, there's so many teams, right? There's so many different styles of play. What else do we have to use to justify how good these teams are besides how they match up against similar opponents and how they match up against the top? That's all we really have to go by when we're comparing, because there's no apples to apples comparison. Everybody's, matchup styles make fights. Everybody's playing everybody different. There's really nothing we can cling to but that, and it's style points. It's been a thing of college football all the time. They've always used the eye test as rankings. They use the eye test and stuff like that in the rankings, and all of that factors into it, including how you do against those teams that you're supposed to beat and how you do against teams you're supposed to lose to. But yeah, like you said, if we come out and we lost a game to, let's say we slipped up a game against a team we're 10-point favorites on, I don't know, Illinois. Let's say we slip up a game to Illinois, but we come in there and we play Ohio State, within 3 points. I would take that probably over beating Illinois and losing to Ohio State by 3 touchdowns, honestly. So I think there is a give and take there, where it's just not record is everything, because it's not really exciting to see teams beat teams we should beat. I mean, that doesn't really do much for me anymore. It's just the getting over the hump that we have yet to see. And that's what we want to do, is we just want to get over that 1,000-pound gorilla on our backs. And the only way to do that is to just beat one of those teams. And if it trades a loss in the process, I'm cool with it.
Really, the only team on the schedule that is far removed is Ohio State.
Yep.
USC is really good, really talented. Of course, had the big year under Lincoln Riley 2 years ago, but they're coming off 8-5. So they have a lot of questions to answer, and of course lose Caleb Williams and have to replace him with Miller Moss. And so there's a grouping of teams where it's like, okay, these are going to be the really fascinating games to see where Nebraska stands. Iowa, of course, Wisconsin, USC, those games in particular, and probably early against Colorado is going to be week 3. So we're going to know a little bit more about the Buffs and whether they're possibly better and just a more physical team. But of course, they won that game last year.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's going to be the ultimate litmus test is coming out against Colorado to see if this team has what it felt like last year when we did play Colorado, was that the team had kind of, I think, almost given up at a certain point because of the past and the fact that like typically anytime Nebraska started to have the wheels fall off like that, it falls off completely. There wasn't, the Ohio State comeback where Levante David stripped the ball. Rex Burkhead, had the little run there with the juke on the outside against Ohio State in Lincoln that one time. But like outside of that, like I don't remember any comebacks. I don't remember any crazy comebacks and stuff like that. So that's going to be a huge test to get over the hump is that Colorado game. And I just think foundationally what they're building over there isn't great. I think it's very fragile the way they're building Colorado over there. And I think the way Nebraska's kind of building is a little bit more, I guess, concrete and a better foundation. But yeah, it's just looking at the schedule. I think the schedule sets up perfectly for us. USC is the ultimate wild card, I feel like, in the Big Ten, because when I was doing my power rankings, like I flipped USC anywhere from between 5 and 9, and I ultimately settled with them at like 6, I think. But I had them moving all over that place. I think they're the biggest question mark. I will say they're kind of climbing up my rankings a little more because the more I see of Miller Moss, the more I like him. The more we talk about Miller Moss, we had Mark, the other guy, Mark from Locked on USC on, and he's really happy about Miller Moss. So they could be tough, but yeah, a lot of unknowns. And one of the toughest games I think early on for us is going to be that Rutgers game. I think that's a trap game for us is against Rutgers, because Rutgers is a very physical team. They do have that physical style of play, and they play above their level, above their talent level, skill level. I mean, they're very well coached, and we're going to be 5-0 probably coming into that game potentially. And so Rutgers is actually one of the sneaky games on there, in my opinion. I have that as our first projected loss.
Even at home.
Yes. I think we might be 5-0 coming in there. We're not used to being 5-0. We might, it's just one of those things. Like I feel like starting 6-0 and going into a bye week. Part of me just won't put it there just yet. I feel like we're going to lose one game that we should win. And that's about all. I mean, outside of that, it's going 6-0. If we do it, whatever. I mean, then we're just going to get drubbed by Ohio State. But I think it might almost help us to drop one of those early and kind of learn from it.
I want to see you personally. I want to see your reaction to 6-0, because we're going to have 2 weeks to see that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, we're going to be partying on here for 2 weeks if that happens, straight up. So everybody's going to join me. So we better all be rooting for 6-0 because we're going to be having a good time in here. But it's 6-0, then what? The bye week and then Ohio State?
It is 6-0, bye week, Indiana, Ohio State.
Indiana. Okay, so at least we got a little warm up in there. Sorry, Indiana, but they're not going to be very good. But yeah. The schedule sets up perfect, especially with the way how young this team is with Dylan Raiola and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that, even with Raiola, like I feel like it would almost, do him good to go in there and battle a close loss or something, and just kind of get that feeling,
Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't know that Nebraska can be looking past Indiana on the road.
Indiana is like probably the second to worst team, if not the worst. Actually, they're probably the worst team in the Big Ten.
You're right.
I feel like, all right, we're probably not in a place to overlook anybody. All right, I'll get that, but I'm just gonna, for the sake of the conversation and trying to get to the Ohio State, like, yeah, I just on the terms of tiers, Indiana's right there with Purdue for me.
Oh, you're right. You are absolutely right. And Indiana was it 1-8 in the Big Ten last year? And they took Louisville to the wire.
Yeah, they played some close games.
They played Penn State really well. They beat Wisconsin. They took Illinois to overtime. They lost on a last-second play to Michigan State.
Yeah. I mean, hey, listen, if we're counting those, then Nebraska's, we should be at the top of the rankings for counting those close losses. But I mean, it's just their talent level. Their talent level. They do sometimes, I guess, show up and play above their level. They punch up sometimes, but I just don't know if they're quite good enough to hang with the Nebraska team this year. Last year, I think, yeah. But this year, I don't think they will be. I think this team's going to take a step up and probably if we do slip up a game, it will be to a team like a Rutgers or somebody in that middle echelon of the Big Ten. Hopefully not the Indianas and Purdue's of the world, because we saw Nebraska against Purdue last year, and even last year handled them pretty easy.
Folks, we appreciate comments and questions. We appreciate the super chat contribution as well. Thank you so much for those. We'll be looking out for those in the stream. And again, join us here each and every Tuesday. Check out what Justin has available both here and Cheesy Corn Sports and the Big Ten show as well.
Absolutely.
We are working on the wide receivers. Justin's been doing some serious homework on these guys. Malachi Coleman, was it against Purdue? You mentioned Purdue. Wasn't it the Purdue game? He had a bomb to the end zone to break that game open. Northwestern.
I think that, because I'm trying to think of, I know a couple of them were Jalen Lloyd. Let's see. Jalen Lloyd had some deep, like his reception average was 39.5. Marcus Washington had 22. I'm trying to remember which game he would have had a long touchdown, and he had 8 receptions, 176 yards. If anybody can recall off the top of your head, let me know. I have ADHD and my memory is
Northwestern 44-yard touchdown catch. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah,
in an 8-point win. So, yep.
He's it was one of those things where Malachi just wasn't quite ready for, to be a primary X receiver, but he has talent out the wazoo. We know that he's our most talented as far as ratings go on the receiver in the receiver room. He was 96 rated 4-star, but he just didn't have the experience. And last year, Marcus Washington was one of the guys that was supposed to be in that wide receiver room and give these guys, on the field some leadership and stuff like that. And he got hurt early. So, Marcus wasn't out there. Isaiah Garcia Castaneda wasn't out there. And then we had, coming into the season, I did a wide receiver preview and talked about, Mr. Jet Sweet Boy. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but all 3 of those guys that were supposed to be our experienced guys coming in weren't there for the season. So Malachi had to step up and just, there wasn't the style of receiver that he is. It wasn't really, the offense wasn't really playing to his strengths. It seemed like this offense was more of like, don't look for your X receiver. It's just kind of find a soft spot. Somebody find a soft spot in the zone and we'll see if we can hit you with the ball. There wasn't a lot of play design that was really kind of what they wanted to run. So Malachi Coleman's probably going to take the biggest step year over year, hopefully, but it remains to be seen. But overall, let me start it with this. I want to ask you a question real quick. Okay. If I ask you some numbers, maybe I should take, let me pull these numbers up here. I'm going to put these on a new thing. And I want you to tell me if you can tell me which numbers are what. And we're just going to do a little thought exercise here. So I have, I went through every receiver and I'm going to go through like how many freshman, junior, sophomore, redshirt, all that stuff that we have. But first things first, I'm going to put this up and I want to lob this question to you. All right, let me see. All right, share. Okay, looking at these numbers right here. Pull this away. All right, so just look at these numbers right here. Can I zoom in on these things? Oh yeah. All right. Actually, don't look away real quick. I got to delete something. Almost fumbled the bag. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Tried it. Okay. Now.
You ready? Okay.
Wait 1 second. Now try it. Go ahead. I wasn't prepared to bring this up on the screen. Sorry, y'all. All right. So let's see. Compare this number right here.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, let's start with this one. Let's just go with this one. Compare this number to this number first. Okay. So we have 87 receptions, 12, 15 yards, 6 touchdowns, 136, 16, 31, 12 per 10 TDs. Okay. So I'm going to separate those and we're going to compare individually to this one. So this one to this one. All right. Who do you think this is? And who do you think this is?
Are we talking?
We're talking just wide receivers, Nebraska wide receivers, the Nebraska team, and also including, incoming transfers.
Well,
not
wait a
in.
minute. None of these guys have caught this many passes in their careers. Well, like
So
you're
here,
saying there's 136 receptions out of somebody on the Nebraska roster?
so I'm gonna show you this real quick. I'll just go ahead and answer it because you're too smart. You broke it down too much. This is the entire Nebraska team receiving last year.
Okay. Yeah.
Everybody who caught a pass.
Oh,
This is
okay.
the Yep. This
So
is
that taken into consideration, can I guess what the rest of these things are?
Yep, go ahead.
Then I'm going to guess. No, those don't add up. So I'm guessing that you went maybe under different quarterbacks, or you did a breakdown of different
And
positions,
this
tight end versus the slot versus
So
the
here's what it
X.
is. So this right here first is all pass catchers. This
Okay.
is all wide receivers. So
Okay.
everybody who's on the roster listed as a wide receiver.
Yep.
Okay. Compared to this was Jamal Banks' season last year. This was Nebraska's entire wide receiver room. Okay. And then going to this one, this is Isaiah Nayer's
Oh,
that
okay.
season compared to all. And this is Isaiah Nayer, Jamal Banks, those two seasons combined.
Gotcha. If
Compared
I
to
would have really looked at the Banks and Nair lines, I would have remembered those numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
Enough.
Yeah, so that was them compared to our entire wide receiver room. That's the breakdown. And compared to all pass catchers, 1,631 yards, 1,532, 15 and a half, 12 per, 10 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. So, looking at that, you really start to see just what kind of, I want to try to put it in the best way I can, the most polite way possible, train wreck that the wide receiver room was last year. And we'll get into that more in a little bit, but I see Nick popped in. I can run through the rest of the wide receiver room here in a second.
Yeah, we will pick up the wide receiver conversation here in just a second. And before we get to our special guest here, I will also throw this number out there as a comparison. If you look at those two receivers coming into the program with 103 receptions and all the other stats included, Billy Kemp
Yep.
and Alex Bullock,
Yep.
based on receptions, were the top two wide receiver.
Yep.
And they combined for 50 catches, not 103.
Yep. Kemp had 35, 310 yards, and Bullock had 15 receptions and 221 yards. And just for full transparency, coming to the season, Alex Bullock being a walk-on, wasn't expected to see the field much. He ended up being one of our wide receiver ones by the Iowa game. So, but yeah, we can go through that more in a second. But yeah, 50 receptions from those two guys. And Billy Kemp's out.
So despite some of the on-field issues that continue for Nebraska, and we will see here in 2024, there's a ton of optimism. One thing that I know that this program got ahead of and really was in front of as much as any program in the country was the NIL initiative. As soon as that became legal, going on 3 years this summer, and the NIL collective is in a good place for Nebraska football going forward. And we got a special guest here who runs and is affiliated with one of the collectives here as a co-founder, Nick Cisco of Fan Cave. Nick, how you doing tonight?
Doing well, Mark. Appreciate you having me on, and happy to chat a little bit about NIL and what we're building at Fan Cave. So
absolutely. And NIL, I think for a lot of fans is such a mystery as to how does it work, who's involved in this, how are those connections being made, and how does this entire process work? So I think you can really fill in the blanks for us in certain ways. So just in regards to the Fan Cave perspective, tell us about Fan Cave, how it came to be and how it's operating right now.
Yeah, well, I'll give you some context because things have dramatically changed here in the last week or so. If you've been following with the Tennessee injunction that came out and the NCAA basically saying we're going to stop enforcing our NIL policy when it comes to communicating with recruits prior to enrollment. So long story short, things are rapidly evolving, but where we're at today and what we're building at Fan Cave, what you're able to do now that you couldn't do before collectives have always been doing under the table contract negotiation with athletes. Typically the way it works is an athlete gets dropped off on their official visit at this office. They don't necessarily know where they're going, who's dropping them off, what they're going to do. The collective gives them kind of a verbal understanding of like, someone in your position group at our school may make roughly this amount of money over this many years if they decided to come to our school. They can't actually, until about a week ago, give them a contract. They couldn't actually talk about terms of the deal in like specific terms and actually sign something legally binding. But where we're at now is because the NCAA has been forced to reverse their stance on this issue. Fans, donors, and NIL collectives all can negotiate with recruits about NIL offers before they enroll. A lot of people think that's scary and that this is, creating chaos in the world, but I actually see it as a great thing that now these recruits who have been getting screwed really through some really shady deals with different collectives. I won't say Nebraska has been part of the shadiness as a Nebraska alum, but we all know that everyone says they're cleaner than they are. But what we can do now is facilitate an open marketplace for fans to bid on their favorite recruits, essentially. So that's what we're building at Fan Cave. Happy to get more into the details, but that's kind of where we're at.
So I think Justin and I will just ping pong back and forth in regards to any questions or comments that we have. So I'll lead it off by saying what you just outlined in regards to the injunction and the dismissal of the NCAA rules not being legal, basically, in the federal courts of Virginia and Tennessee, and that spreading throughout the nation. How has that changed the way that you operate at Fan Cave?
Yeah, great question. So originally, we were actually just focused on helping current athletes. We had been building this in the back burner for a long time, anticipating something like this happening. But we've been helping current athletes. We had like a paid chat feature. You can, pay athletes to text them after a game and congratulate them, or there's a tip jar, things like that. But what this injunction has done, originally it was only in Tennessee and Virginia and sort of implicitly everywhere else. But just this last Friday, Charlie Baker with that statement basically saying, we're not going to enforce anywhere our policy on preventing fans, NIL collectives, anyone from negotiating with recruits about their NIL offers. So anyway, what we've been doing at Fan Cave is dramatically evolved in the last week as things have shifted. But we're basically wanting to be on the forefront of what we see as where things are going in terms of an open marketplace for donors to offer recruits to come to their school. We think the current system with individual NIL collectives serving the best interests of their donors at individual schools is not a sustainable model for the future. We think things are going to move more towards common athlete protection, salary caps, players associations, collective bargaining. And we just want to be on the forefront of building that open marketplace because, frankly, Mark, I think the genie's out of the bottle, and whether people like it or not, donors are always going to want to pay players to come to their school. And so rather than try to curtail their ability to do that and build this quasi open system, we should just embrace what they want to do and build the right guardrails around where things are going. And that's what we want to do at Fan Cave.
Yeah, and to your point, I'm assuming that you think the contractual stuff is good because it protects the players. Because I remember Matt Rule talking about it when he did the interview with I believe on ESPN, where he was like, we don't have contracts with these guys right now. And so some of these guys that they're promised something somewhere else, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And they come to him, telling him about these stories. And he's like, he thought that, that was kind of an issue that they're not able to kind of get these things in writing. And so I guess the first part of my question is it more so the players being protected that is the reason why, or is there any more reasons why you think that this is kind of the route that is the best?
Great question. I think the athletes come first. The kinds of, we've all heard the horror stories of how recruits have been getting screwed and offered things that haven't been delivered upon. And NIL collectives, we had the Michigan State story where their collective just kind of folded under. It comes first for me in terms of just protecting athletes, but also to that point, I think you can make an argument that you actually protect donors in ways that the NIL collectives right now can't. If you build an open marketplace with guardrails around things like salary caps, things like protection against what happens when an athlete transfers, what happens when an athlete tears their ACL, and like still protecting that athlete and their interests and making sure they're taken care of, but also protecting donors and minimizing their risk with open standards. That's stuff that only can come. It can only come when you look at things with a holistic lens and not just in the context of a specific school, trying to maximize the interests of one school. And so we're going to be working with conferences and different programs across the country to try to build those open standards, and kind of build from the ground up a system that everyone's happy with, because everyone's pretty unhappy with the system right now that's just been kind of with collectives popping up everywhere, playing by their own rules. Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark. I'll ask
Obviously, with all of this going on, you've had a lot of interactions with the athletes. Do you have a lot of interactions with fans? Do you have any forums or anything,
Absolutely.
social media and all of that? And what is the response from fans? Because certainly, while it's my experience that there was a large portion of the fan base, not Nebraska, just the college football fan base, that was pro rewarding the players for the work that they put in. And with all the multi-millions of dollars coming into this industry, and now that it's happened, there is a bit of a pushback because it is, quote, ruining the game.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think what you're describing is donor fatigue. The athletic departments that we all love and support the teams we love have been asking donors forever to support, new facilities, new weight room, all these new advantages, with the goal of luring recruits to come to their school. And what you've seen in the last couple of years, because there haven't been guardrails in place, because this has been just a free for all, when the NCAA said NIL is now okay, we can pay players. What you've seen is that schools have just leaned even farther into asking their fans to put up money, not just for the facility, not just for the South Stadium renovation, but also for paying the players to come to their school. So I think what you're describing is donor fatigue. I've been seeing that everywhere. And I think that's the initial hesitation when we talk about, building an open system for fans to be able to support recruits to come to their school. I think what you'll see over the coming years, especially as we move towards collective bargaining and better athlete protection, salary caps, things like that, is that it's less going to be about donors having to fork over money directly for recruits to come to their school. That's still going to happen. You're still going to have donors that want to, induce athletes to want to come to their school. But you're also going to see teams themselves, when they can start directly getting involved in the NIL process, by directly paying athletes, they're also going to need to abide by open standards. And so we're kind of in this limbo right now. But I think that fans overall want a better system. Coaches want a better system. Conferences want a better system. Everyone hates what the NCAA has done in just creating chaos, essentially. And so even though we're still in the growing pains, I think, of building a system that everyone's really excited about, I think we're working towards what that future looks like, where donors don't feel fatigue, but instead feel like athletes are getting fairly compensated, which is originally what this was all about.
Yeah, I guess my next question is, because schools have their individual collectives. Nebraska has the 1890 NIL collective, and I guess in trying to make sense of the collectives, how do these work? Do they all go into all the donations go directly to the same place? How do fans differentiate between what's what, and is there any way you can break that down and kind of give us the nuance to that?
Yeah, I'll give you the rundown. The way it typically works now, you have the most high dollar donors giving money to NIL collectives are getting, special treatment. So they get to earmark, like, hey, I want this donation to go to Dylan Raiola. Hey, I want this donation to go to this guy or this position group, or I just had a dinner with Fred Hoiberg and he was mentioning that he needs money for this specific guy. Like, that stuff's happening for the high dollar people. But what you're seeing for the average fan who is being asked to give money to collectives, and you have like the Hold the Line campaign in North Carolina, or I think Michigan had something after the national championship to prevent guys from transferring. The average fan is just being asked to, at least from their perspective, click through this PayPal link, give money to this kind of black box, and you don't know really where that money's going. I mean, you're kind of assuming that the head coach or someone from the athletic department is actually involved in, here's where the money should be going to specific guys, to specific transfer portal guys, to specific recruits, but you don't actually know. And so in my experience in talking to collectives and athletic departments, it's less advanced as you think it is. And the communications are less formal than you think they are. And everyone's just kind of running like a chicken with their head cut off about what they're allowed to do and who they're allowed to talk to. And so I think fans who are giving money to collectives on a monthly basis, just kind of assuming it's going to the place they think they are.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more and more stories moving forward here about collectives managing monies in ways that you don't necessarily get excited about.
Absolutely.
But that's just my experience in talking to, maybe 20 collectives in different athletic departments about how they manage this stuff.
So more transparency, essentially. That makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that contributes to the donor fatigue when you just feel like you're giving money endlessly and, you're trying to do the right thing. You're a fan of your team and you want to build the best roster and contribute to success, but you just don't know where that money's going, how it's being used.
So Nick, we just have a couple minutes here. We're going to pull up the site. Just let people know where it's located, how they can find it, and what they're going to see when they get there.
Yeah. So basically, Fan Cave. Are you wanting me to pull it up, or are you gonna get up there?
I've got it here.
Sounds good.
Although if you pull it up, you're going to be able to, because there's a whole sign-in process that I don't have access to. So it may be better if you pull it up.
Yeah, give me a second here.
Douglas, the answer to your question is Josh Heupel.
It certainly is.
Window up. All right, so it's not going to let me due to system settings. So maybe if you just pull up the main page, that might be the best thing. I can talk through it. Just go to fancave.me.
So yeah, when I go there, this is what I get. It automatically takes me to a particular player there.
Yeah. So if you just go to fancave.me, you can go to just the generic. Yeah, there you go. So basically what we have right now is you can just sign in. We've got all the 2025 recruits loaded up. We're working with a bunch of them one-off on basically getting the word out there about their own collective, basically. Like, this is just the open marketplace, and recruits actually are able to own the recruiting process for themselves, receive offers from not only fans and donors, but collectives, and basically take control of their recruiting process. So if you just click on like TJ Lateef there and just click on view in the bottom right.
There's your guy, Justin.
There's my guy. I did a film breakdown on him a few days ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. TJ Lateef.
If that opens up. Or you can go to fancave.me/TJ-Lateef. But anyway, I mean, we've got it set up where you can actually go to their recruitment.
Oh.
I don't know if it opened up in a separate window or.
Yes, it did. Okay.
I was like, I'm pretty sure that should open up.
The StreamYard present works weird. I was
just gonna let Mark deal with that. So every recruit has their own profile, and so they can put their huddle highlights and other kinds of NIL opportunities they have, endorsements, brand stuff, all their social media. But if you click on recruitment open there, you can go to their kind of recruitment window. Just click anywhere there, make offer. And so what we have is actually fans who are able to directly send an offer to TJ because of what's happened with this injunction. It's now, an open marketplace where fans themselves don't have to go through a collective who's doing this under the table negotiation. You can actually directly send offers to TJ on the condition that he comes to your school. And if he doesn't, you get the money right back in your Fan Cave wallet to contribute to the next recruit that you're interested in. So unlike NIL collectives, you actually have an opportunity here to earmark money to specific guys you want and get that money back if they don't come to your school. TJ here, we're working on building up these guys' profiles and getting them to spread the word about this. But this is an opportunity for guys like him to own their recruiting process. We don't sign any predatory contracts with them. This is literally just a marketplace for fans to send offers. And so we're hoping to build it up from here. But
question, what the rankings and the monetary amounts, what are the differences in those?
So this is literally
on his likelihood to go to certain teams, or
no, this is literally money that fans have actually offered TJ to come to their school.
Oh,
and so it's actually ranked by currently Nebraska fans have the highest overall offer value for TJ. So
is that average?
No, this is total.
Okay, so it's just going to keep adding it up as we go.
Yeah, we just launched TJ's yesterday, and so we're anticipating as we get through the recruiting cycle for 2025, this stuff will start taking off. And we've got transfer portal coming up, but yeah, yep.
Cool. That's cool to know, because I was wondering if there's going to be anywhere that tracks the total. I wasn't sure if that was, you're able to do that, but yeah, that's actually pretty cool. Yeah, and this 2025 cycle just started, so yeah, I don't expect it, but
Right.
that's cool that it's
and we're gonna
see the amounts too.
Yep, 100% transparent. You're going to see the amount that TJ's offer from every school. We're also going to be plugging in NIL collective estimates. So basically, you can get a rough idea of the overall package for a guy like this, and feel like your fan base is in a good position to get the guy. And so we're going to be continuing to update this stuff and make it better and more interesting for fans. We'll have a leaderboard for support for every athlete, so fans can see who's contributing the most. You'll get access to exclusive content from TJ, so insider recruiting information. If you make an offer to him, then you'll get that kind of backdoor insider access, and then all kinds of future rewards and stuff we're going to be delivering for fans who actually support these recruits. So,
Mark, may I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Actually, I probably just forgot, because I was just thinking about that. Oh yeah, I know. You just talked about the evaluation, the NIL valuation. What kind of goes into that? How do y'all come up with the player evaluation and how much you think they're quote unquote worth?
Yeah, great question. So we're hoping that the way this stuff evolves over time is that the whole thing's transparent, so there is no need to make that determination. We're hoping over time that it's fans and donors and these collectives that are working through a transparent system, making these offers public, making the terms of these contracts public, so that there is no need to come up with a valuation. In the meantime, we're using a bunch of different metrics. On3 has an NIL valuation system that they use, going through other recruiting ranking sites and determining roughly, based on the contracts that we're able to look at from different collectives, what a guy like this might be worth. But we anticipate over time, as more fans and donors are going through an open system like this, as opposed to private collectives, that those numbers will be more and more transparent and easy to see just inherently. Yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, appreciate you guys having me on. I'm happy to chat NIL anytime. So I live and breathe this stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, it was definitely a learning experience for us, and hopefully everyone that watches the show. Again, you can join Nick there. You see the X handle, Fan Cave Team, right there. And Nick, we appreciate you stopping by. And thanks for enlightening us on the Nebraska NIL initiative.
Yeah, guys, and go Big Red.
Go Big Red.
Yeah. See ya.
Bye. Very
cool.
Drizzle Stick came in late with a question. Are there any rules, contracts preventing kids from going to school? Collect giant. I would imagine you would probably think by now they probably don't have a lot of the specifics of that ironed down. I would think, because the Tennessee Virginia stuff, that just happened within the last 2 weeks where they made the decision.
Yes.
3 weeks. Yeah. So I wonder if they have that stuff ironed out yet about how exactly that's going to work. Because I was going to ask, are there clauses in there, kind of like an NFL contract? But I would imagine, like he said, the communication and everything's not as streamlined as we think it is. So who knows? Right now, it could just be like a bill of sale that they write on the paper.
Drizzle Stick, that is something that I was asking or stating from day one. I was stating, okay, what is going to keep this athlete from taking a bag and running to another school? And everything's signed. So I would think that there would be a stipulation that you stay at the school, just like there's a stipulation within what Nick just presented to us, that if for those Nebraska fans who are donating toward his NIL collective, TJ Lateef was our example there. You get your money back, and you can then use that elsewhere if he chooses another school. But I would think that there's a contract that is signed that is a legal binding contract, just like any other contract that ties that collective to that player in school.
I'm going to assume by when he said it also protects the donor that there's probably something in writing there it has some kind of contractual agreement for the length of the, that the player also has to agree to, but then you get into the question of is it a bad look for a player to come in and sign a 1-year contract versus a player to come in and sign 2, so then that's a whole different question. It's going to get a lot more confusing before it gets cleared out.
Well, I would guess that based on what we're seeing right now and how this is working is that the player's only obligated for one season.
At a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes probably the most sense right now, because outside of that, like I said, yeah, then they could really base it off of like, oh, okay, so wheel and deal, you want to be here 3 years, we'll throw an extra $3 million. I don't think they're at that point yet. Yeah.
All right, Justin, we've got just a couple minutes. Do we want to continue with the wide receivers, or did you have a whole lot more that you wanted to go through?
I had a lot more that I'll go through, so I'll put that out in a video. But I did want to touch on a quick little, I don't know if there was an interview put out today on YouTube, if y'all go check it out, with Matt Rule. And I listened to part of it. I haven't been able to listen to the whole thing just yet, but some of the stuff that he was echoing in there is a lot of the stuff that we've kind of been talking about this offseason, but he really kind of put it in perspective where, he's talking about the standard last year. And I mentioned before where he's talking about the standard last year with the coaches, they took a lot of the heat for a lot of things that happened last year, but now it's putting it on the players. There's a standard that's set, and this is going to be the standard. However, we expect that to increase each and every year, right? And at this point, what he said is the reason that they're doing these small little competition stuff, where they're doing, you get a point if you show up during the winter condition of the mat drills, that you get a point if you show up to a basketball game or a wrestling game, you get a point. It's doing the little things that he said they quote unquote don't want to do. And it breeds competition, because essentially competitors compete. And typically, if you're an athlete, you want to compete at stuff you're athletic about, but typically that athleticism or that competitive nature will kick in no matter what you're doing. And he says you'll be good at the things you're good at, but essentially what he's trying to work on is them being good at stuff you don't like and wanting to attack, he says, quote unquote, attack the things you hate, because what that does is it makes everything that the players do a competition. And that means, when they're out on the field and when they're, practicing, all of that competitive nature is going to bring the team closer together and bring them as more of a unit and show on the field. And it just teaches you to be competitive no matter what you do. There isn't any of those plays where you take off. And so overall, he said the team's closer. He said the standards that they have for themselves are raising. So what he is trying to implement is being implemented. But he also said, don't let them be victims of the past, because, we could sit here and say sob story. We lost a lot of one-score games and all this, but his mindset is to just attack it and just reset each and every game, just reset, because that is something that is held over this program. And it's hard to blind people from it. It's hard to blind the players from it. So the last interesting tidbit too, about Tony White, we mentioned Tony White not leaving for, UCLA, not leaving for a couple of the other head coaching jobs that were open. And then Nebraska, threw a $600,000 pay increase and a contract, change up. And we assumed that they did that to keep him. Well, Matt Rule actually alluded to this. He said that Tony White agreed to stay before they did that stuff. So that's cool too, because now you get to feel that Tony White buys in to what's happening there and sees, what's happening there as something he wants to be a part of. And just a little perspective there change, because it's one thing to throw money at a guy to get him to stay, but it's another thing to have a guy stay and then you throw a little bit of money at him to incentivize his work. I just think the buy-in across the board and everything is just really good. Scott Frost was one of those guys that I felt like he always threw his coordinators under the bus, and I don't think there was a connection that they have with these teams like they do right now. Scott Frost was just blame everybody else. Let's fire even his friends that he brought with him, Chins and all those guys. Just fire this guy. But it's different. And I love the way Matt Rule is letting the players hold themselves accountable. And it's a little bit more hands-on when you're starting, just hands-on. And he's like, do this, don't do that. And then kind of as time goes on, it's like, raising a kid, you're just a little more hands-off and just kind of let them learn on their own and be there when they need a hand. And so I really like the way this team is progressing, and everything Matt Rule says, man, he's a talker, that's for sure. So if he's selling wolf tickets, I'm buying them all up.
The next stop for the Voice of College Football is coming up on the Michigan Show in just a few minutes. I'll be headed over there to fill in as host. So please join us on the Michigan show. That's coming up in just a few minutes.
Yep. Get over there. It's a good time.
What's going on with you this week, Justin?
So we, Big Ten show, we posted a USC preview. We talked about how USC is a gigantic question mark. So yesterday we posted up a USC program overview going over, what to expect from them. Mark from Locked On USC came over and gave us some insights. So if y'all want to just go over there and get some ideas about your Big Ten foes, go ahead. We have an Iowa program overview. We had Jeffrey the Greek on, so we have a lot of stuff to learn over there. Y'all can reach in about your rivals. Oregon, their fans came through heavy, so there's an Oregon video up. Just go do some research, and we got Nebraska coming soon.
Very cool. Every Tuesday, folks, bring a friend or two or 50 with you next week. 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 Central for Huskers Live. Spring football's coming soon, and we're going to be all over it. So lock it in, and we'll see you next Tuesday.